Hi everyone, thanks for being here on a Friday evening in Mexico City. It's cocktail hour, I think, but we're going to talk art first. So yes, I'm a curator at Witte de Wit, Center for Contemporary Art, based in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. I've been there since 2012. Tonight I will focus on a couple of projects that I worked on at Witte de Wit that relate to our archive, which is a very strange kind of archive since we are a non-collecting institution. We're not a museum, we only do temporary exhibitions. So the archive we have is an archive that consists of everything around the exhibitions, around the art, but never the art itself. And so between 2015 and 2017, through our exhibition program, and as such through the agency of a couple of artists that we worked with, we came to what we now call our archive. But when we started, there was no such thing, or at least there was, the material was there, but it had no shape or form that you could call an archive. So what I'll be presenting is how we got to having an archive through our programming. So very briefly, for those, it's always nice to see what we're talking about. This is our building in the center of Rotterdam. And a brief timeline. So Witte de Wit was founded in 1990. In 2000 was our 10th anniversary. And then in 2012, there was a publication called 20 Plus Years Witte de Wit. The plus was added because the book was supposed to be ready by 2010, but it took 2 more years to make it, as it goes. And then in 2015, we had our 25th anniversary, and we celebrated that through a program titled In Light of 25 Years with these artists there. And then in 2016, following In Light of 25 Years, we did another series of exhibitions, and I'll walk us through these different events as we go. This is the cover of the 20 plus years of Witte de Wit. The cover is an image of David Lamelas's character studies or character appropriations. So just to show, if anything was in place in terms of our own history or an archive, it was this book. It was a tremendous job that was done by the people working at Witte de Wit at the time, Zoe Gray, Nikolaus Schaffhausen, and Monika Cevcik. And what it did, as you can see, it's really conceived as a chronology. It's every show, every book or publication, every public program, educational event, illustrated with 1 or 2 images, a short description, dates, facts. It's a very important reference for us as an institution, but at the same time, through the project that I'll be talking about later, we also realized how this is just the beginning, this indexing. It's a very, it's the bare bones, it's the absolute necessity, but it's also, it lacks everything that you are craving as soon as you look at something, looking for something more. But that said, we couldn't have done what we did to make our archive without this book. So this was the absolute basis for us. And this is another page, and I included this because it includes the important exhibition, the Coartadas or Alibis exhibition that we showed, which was, I think, at least from where I'm sitting, a quite important show on Mexican contemporary art at the time. Yes, she was the curator, exactly, yeah. So then I jumped to 2015 when we celebrated our 25th anniversary. And in preparing that celebration, I went to look into the very first publication we did, which was called The Lectures, which was just an account, a written out version of some of the lectures we had that year. And I'll read it out because it's a nice little paragraph. It says, "The image of art that Witte de Wit disseminates is a universal and autonomous one. It is dissemination that should not prevent the construction of a framework which can tell us, for example, something about the glamour of art and its capacity for communication, about art from beyond Europe or North America, or about the terror of current events." And what struck me was that this kind of mission statement from 1990 in a way still applies. Of course, many things can be, criticize or problematize, especially, of course, this notion of a universal a universal idea of art or image of art, but still I think it's things like the glamour of art, but also the terror of current events. I think both of them are still relevant. So in a way, these were also starting questions for that program. And what we did is we invited 10 artists to make work based on something they found in our history. So what we did, we gave them a copy of the 20 Plus book that I showed you, and really asked them, okay, have a look, browse through it, and whatever is of interest to you, take that as a departure point to create a new work. So really taking sediments from the past as a departure point for a new creation. So again, what we really wanted to avoid is to make it a boring institutional exercise of celebrating ourselves and just patting ourselves on the back. But it's instead making it a fertile soil for new artists that we wanted to work with at the time to make something new out of that. So one case study that I'll present here is a work by a Belgian artist, Freek Wambach, and he was drawn to one work by Marcel Brotaars that was shown in a show of 1996 called Still a Novel, and it was a beautiful exhibition about the origins of cinema and photography and how it relates to visual art. And so he found these 3 drawings by Muybridge, but not of course, again, we didn't have the original Brotaars drawings in our archive, we had photocopies of them. But what I should add for this is that at the time, so these artists would come to me and say, or in this case Freek would be like, okay, I saw in the book that Brotaars was in this exhibition, I'm intrigued by that work, what exactly did you show? And then I had to go look in our building, in drawers, in boxes, in the basement, all over the place. Okay, what actually did we show of Marcel Brotaars? And it was such a pain finding that information, but also a joy of discovering that there's all this material I'd never engaged with before. But so this, I think, was and this was the case for every artist who participated in Light of 25 years. They were all looking for something very specific, but every time I needed to go look for it, it was complete chaos and very difficult to actually find it. It wasn't very accessible. So that's the very first encounter with the necessity to structure and organize this archive of ours. And then this is the work that Freek made. Departing from, and of course the idea was not for them to illustrate old work with new work, but more to take it as a stepping stone or a departure point and make work that they would make, from their own respective practices. I don't think no, I'm not going to get into the details, but you see 2 coconut shells on these tables, and they're part of a series of works that Freek has made, inspired by Foley artists. And so the horse, the galloping horse in Brotaars' drawing is evoked here with the 2 coconuts, because when you do the coconuts, when you clap them together, you hear a galloping horse. And that's from the other side. So it was a 2-sided gigantic light box. It was, I think it was 12 by 3 meters, filling up the entire ground floor space. This is another one, a very funny one. This is actually a work by Ramona Malasauskas, who's technically not an artist per se, but a curator, but overall creative, let's say. And he took, and I think this was a very nice use of the archive as well. This is an image taken during the opening night of a show, I think 1993, I might be mistaken, I'm not sure, by Hess, a Belgian artist as well, actually. And it's a very funny picture because you see the audience and they're all staring at one video that was playing in the exhibition space, but the photographer at the time stood behind the monitor and took a picture of all the people looking. So it's a very nice, image about looking, being seen, looking at something. And this, you don't see it in the, I think, or maybe I included it. No. This, at night, the light box was on and you would walk through the street and you could see through the windows all these people were staring out at you from our building. This was another one. This was by German-Austrian artist collective Mahoney. And they picked up some of the themes that Ito Barada also explored in her exhibition at Witzedubit, which was all about migration and especially in the Mediterranean, which is still sadly topical today. what they did is they took every euro bill has a bridge on it, and the €500 bill has the most modern bridge on it. So the bridge that you see evoked on the image on the light box kind of references that, and then these rescue blankets. It was a very, very strong. This was the first in the series. A very strong presentation, I felt. Just to show you a bit of the diversity also of the kind of projects that were part of it. So that was 2015, and by then we realized we need to do something with this archive, because we cannot let all this wonderful material just linger around in dusty boxes all over the place. So then we decided to, in 2016, to dedicate our entire third floor to working on our archive. So we didn't program any exhibitions. We really made this our work at the time. So we swept through the entire building, and everything we found that was archivable or archive material we placed in the exhibition space. So all of this was also on view for the audience to see. So it wasn't a behind the scenes kind of, oh no, we don't want to show the messy part of making an archive. No, we want to actually show this and do it, make it part of what we do, not something that we have to kind of do on the side. So this was also the cards for that. So what you see is a floor plan of Witte de Wit, and this is our wonderful deputy directors, Paul van Gennep, who's been at Witte de Wit for 28 years now, since the very first day, and he's our living archive in many ways. So he kind of made the setting for that, and this is what that looks like. So this is already way too clean. This doesn't show you what a mess it was, but this is where we just dumped all the mess that we found. So you see all these insane folders and VHS tapes. If you remember VHS tapes, yes. What do you do with them now? I mean, all of a sudden, we were also faced with all these preservation questions and very obvious archival questions, but all of a sudden, since we'd made the commitment to do it, we now actually had to find answers to these questions, which we hadn't really done before. So this was the mess as it was standing there. Of course, it's incredibly charming, all this yellowed paper. And this isn't even all of it. There was much more in the beginning. These photographs were taken after a couple of months of working on them already. But you get a sense of the complete chaos of it as well. You know, also because at Witte de Wit, every 6 years or 3 + 3 years, there's a new director. Also, a lot of curators come and go. So systems are put in place, but then not continued. So sometimes you have systems that have been half implemented and then abandoned, which actually makes things worse, because then you have to undo a system that had been put in place before. And like here you see those old boxes that have a uniform label with our very first logo, but these were all emptied, and then we got rid of them. Which I think is also very important to know, that we think now that we've done our archive, but in 20, 30, 40 years they look probably at our boxes and go, what do we do with this? And then this is the cleaned up version. So you can see we have this kind of working stations, and then the neat boxes there. And what we did is, and this is why the 20+ book again comes in handy, we had the chronological listing of every project. Every project was given a number, and every number had a box. And those projects that need 5 boxes have, number and then XXX. And then you see Marie Egger there, curator, who was temporarily with us then, slaving away at the digital archive. Because also what was very interesting to find is that around 2000, 2001, 2002, all of a sudden, per project, there was not that much print material anymore. Everything had gone digital. So all of a sudden, the boxes go from being, full to the brim to not even there's this much available. So she was picking that up and organizing our online server/archive from that on. But I won't talk about that too much, because it's less interesting in a way. Because we all know what servers look like. I mean, in a way, we kept the same structure. Maybe that is important. We kept the same structure of the boxes for the online server archive as well. So in a way, it's just a digital box. Yeah. But then, again, we didn't only do the archival work, we also invited artists to work alongside us. So, which in hindsight was a bit crazy that we did that, because it made the archival work more interesting, but it makes it more difficult as well, because we had artists coming in and out of the archive in the making as we were doing it. So this is the invitation card. Again, this was a series of invitations that we did. Again, this floor plan. And this is by Casper Bosmans. Again, young Belgian artist that I've worked with for this specific exhibition then. And you can see it says archive on the left and the mess on the right, and then the other rooms were his exhibition rooms where he made work. And what he did quite beautifully, it was a show called Decorations, and he distilled 5 quite general topics from the history of Witte de Wit. So he didn't zoom in like before Freek with that piece from that exhibition. No, he kind of again looked through the 20 plus book, and he came to Witte de Wit and looked at the already archived boxes, and he said, okay, I'm seeing overall what are the common threads in 28 years of contemporary, or at the time 27 years of contemporary art programming. And these were these general topics: migration, domesticity, sexuality, urban development, and ecology. But what's very interesting was also what is missing from this story. And then from his own personal interest, he included folk art as the one thing that was missing from that history. And indeed, it was a bit of a blind spot in the programming up to then. And so what was really nice is he brought in an archive within the... he brought in an external archive into his exhibition that related to our archive, which was the 10,000 Years of Nordic Folk Art photographic archive by Cobra artist Asger Jorn, which is an incredible archive of photographs of Scandinavian architecture. And this was part of a wonderful initiative, which was the Scandinavian Institute for Comparative Vandalism, which I thought was a really interesting notion to also bring into this exercise of archiving, because it's also it's a solidifying exercise, and you're building a legacy, but you're also aware that whatever you build up someday will come down. So I thought this idea of comparative vandalism was very interesting, to already bring that in as well, to show also the not per se the vanity, but just the fragility also of these attempts at unifying these kind of stories of an institution. And also in a way I like this act of the artist being the vandal as well. He's being invited, but he's also kind of destroying it, again through the folk art, this wild art aspect that he brought in and kind of disrupted these more Apollonial concepts of migration, domestic, sexual, etc. And so this was, I'd known Casper's work before, and he makes this beautiful series of legend paintings, he calls them, and they were a sort of visual synthesis of his research, but instead of writing a text where he writes, I looked at this, I looked at that, these are my references, and this is what I take from them, he paints them. So they're kind of these beautiful little paintings that all these very symbolic elements come together, and they are kind of keys to read his other work. And my very first invitation to him was quite, in hindsight, a bit absurd, but we ended up doing it in some lesser capacity, but was for him to make a legend painting for every box. So every archive box would have one painting in the lid. In the end, we didn't do all of them. He picked exhibitions that he was interested in, which is of course much more doable, but also more fun for him to follow his own subjective taste. And so if you come to Witte de Wit now and you look at these specific archival boxes, you will lift the lid off and you will find this little painting on the inside. And I also very much like the idea of this archive not being this, you can't touch this, holy, it's very good and healthy, I think, to inject it with some subjective interpretations as well. And also towards the future, possible researchers in the future. The one on the left, for example, is of the Itabarada exhibition, And the one on the right, all the far right, was the very first exhibition of Guillaume Bell at Witte de Witt. It was our opening exhibition in 1990. The one with the phoenix and the photography relates to an exhibition by Paula Pivi, who had the whole project was photographic portraits of tulkus, to Tibetan monks, who are all reincarnations of the Dalai Lama. So all different types of Dalai Lamas, so they all rise like phoenixes again, and this idea of rebirth. So there are these very nice dormant presences in our archive, and he's welcome. He's super busy, unfortunately, but also good. But he's welcome to keep adding to the archive as well with these little legend paintings. So this was the initial idea. He did a couple of them, but then we expanded and we turned it into an actual exhibition. He painted these legend paintings for the topics that he distilled from our history. So this is the legend painting for domesticity. This is the one for sexuality. This is another one. I won't get into that, but it's a beautiful one. He made a new sculpture that related to work by Paul Tech, and this is the legend that accompanies that reiteration of a Paul Tech work. This is the one for migration. So you have the two pillars there, and you saw them in the legend painting on the box for Ito Barada, and the pillars are the Pillars of Hercules, and the Pillars of Hercules is an ancient name for the Strait of Gibraltar, where you have the two, you have the North African coast and then the European coast. So it's this very symbolic strait or division between two worlds. And then this is the one for urbanism, the city and the house. And this is the one for the folk art or the vandalism. And so you have this Greek temple that's being this aggressive presence, and then the anonymity, the mask of folk art also usually being anonymous. There's no artist behind most folk art. It's produced anonymously. And this is the one for ecology. And then each legend painting related to a big mural, which I think it was very interesting for Casper, who is a painter really, to do these murals, but also for, in a way, you're inserting yourself in the building as well. And of course there's been other mural works throughout the history of Witte de Witt, but what's nice with murals is you don't take them away, you paint over them, and they are part of the building forever. So I really like this gesture of inserting these paintings in the building itself. So the one in the back, the big blue one with this line on the top, is the mural for urbanism, and this is one of the two pillars of Gibraltar, and Quetta is the other one on the African coast. So this is the other pillar. On the left is the tablecloth mural for domesticity, and the pink gradient is the mural for sexuality. Okay, those were all the images I had of Casper's show. But again, a very symbolic interpretation, and in the end also, this is why the title was Decorations, also a very abstract one, or a very decorative one, a very superficial, if you want, take on this huge archive and the vast diversity of topics in there. But again, also offering what I find a truly unique artist's vision and allowing that to come through. So it's not only a didactic exercise, it's also an opportunity for an artist to work in a certain way and develop their own respective practices. Alongside this, on our second exhibition floor, we did an exhibition that I think was really the core archival material exhibition. It was an exhibition by artist duo Bik van der Pol, who are Rotterdam based and who know Witte de Witt in and out. One of the duo has been on our board also previously, not while they were doing the show, but before. So they're very, very familiar with the institution, but also, of course, many parts of it and of its history were unknown to them. And they did this wonderful long research into different aspects of the archive, of the stories of Witte de Witt, with a special focus on projects that took place at Witte de Witt relating to the city. So not sticking to the building itself and the exhibitions there, but also when did the institution venture out into the city and what happened there, but also how did these already quite it's not an exhibition, so there's things that happen outside and then they're brought back into the institution. How does that survive? How do those things leave a trace in the archive or the imaginary of an institution? Yeah, that's the text of it. Let me see if there's anything. Yeah, I think really also this question of what is the history of an institution? How does it continue to inform what we do now? And what's the role of artists actually in building this institutional legacy? And it was very nice for them to become also active agents in making that history by now having a show about it. So it was very circular almost in its process. So this is the exhibition view. So in a way they went for this very straightforward archival look. The entire exhibition was a maze of this shelving system. And I think what was really interesting was this tension also of, for example, the basketball. This is the crazy nature of our archive. This is a basketball that dates back from Guillaume Belle's opening exhibition in 27th of January 1990. There was an installation, it had a basketball, and that basketball for some reason is still at Witte de Wit. It is absolutely, of course, not an artwork. It's not about fetishizing this, but it is interesting that remains. This is what remains of the passage of an artist in 1990, and that's what's still there in 2016. And you see in the back the slide projector running in the back wall, and throughout the exhibition they had made a selection of slides, because again, pre-2001 all of our exhibitions were photographed and we had slides of all these photographs, and in a way this was also one of the main things that we did. We had all of those slides digitized, which was a huge, it's not cheap doing that, but it's vital we do that, because of course we are in the field of visual arts, and seeing what those shows looked like is of course incredibly precious, and a great treat for us to have now, because I had no idea what most of these shows actually looked like. You know about that show in 1996, but I don't know what our space looked like then. I don't know what. So now, thanks to this as well, now we have an idea of that. So I'll just show a couple of more things also, like that beautiful scale model in plexi and yellow plastic from Rita McBride's Arena project. It's kind of amazing, the hardcore physical reality also of making art and producing exhibitions is also what remains. The artworks again leave, but everything around it stays. So in that little cardboard box there were still like little metal elements that were used to construct this huge arena in the exhibition. This was a very interesting case, and I'll talk about this a bit more. Of course, in our archive, we have a lot of correspondences between artists and curators, artists and directors and other directors. So all of this, and this is sometimes sensitive information. Luckily, time passes and the rough edges, or it's less. It's not that painful anymore, but still, how do you deal with the privacy of people who are still in the art world? They're still active today. So we didn't quite, but some of them are really interesting. And this, I think, is the one from, I think it's the John Knight one. Let me check. And in his exhibition, John Knight used one of these overhead projectors. And the letter is addressed to the then director, Chris Zerkon, saying, I believe that overhead projector you bought is mine, because I used it in an artwork and now I think you should give it to me. Very banal example, but these kind of, and of course it's about money, it's tricky, it's all quite awkward. It's Chris Zerkon also. So what do we do? How do we show this? And of course, me talking about it now makes it again slightly, how do you deal with this? But then the idea came to, we started calling them conflict letters from the archive, and we made transparent copies of them, and the audience could lay them on the overhead projector as they went through them. So in that sense, they were present, but they weren't always there, and it wasn't that in your face, and I thought it was also a very nice reference to that conflict about that overhead projector, but also just to see how can we deal with that sensitive material in that sense. And also what was interesting, there's clearly also a limit of, because this was from 1992, 2002 or something, like really early on. So also, it's at a safe distance in time. We also found emails from more recent shows from 2014, and those we said no, we can't. It's too early. It's too early to put that in a show now. So that's also interesting. Overall, through all these projects now at With to Do It, we have this thing where we are very archive aware, which we weren't before, and now it's really a thing of, you know, do you print this email? Do you keep it? Should this remain in the log, the physical log of this exhibition, or what can go? And that's been, interesting to notice as well. All of a sudden, you work towards an archive much more consciously. And then I'll finish with just some very dry, but I think interesting facts. So this is the list, for example, what I mentioned. All of these projects have a number, and it's the year, and then the number of, is it the first show that year, then it's 12 and then 1, because it's the first show from 2012. These are the boxes as we have them now. So you can see also Paul Tech, for example. We had this really big Paul Tech exhibition, and we are almost a Paul Tech research center because of it, because we have an enormous amount of information on Paul Tech. The curators at the time really did their homework and full correspondences of Paul Tech, etc., etc. So he has multiple boxes, I think, like, how many are there? Lots. This is again the VHS, still to be determined what we do with them, because also some of them ended up at With to Do It, and they're works that we never even showed. So you wonder how come they're even at With to Do It. What do we do with those kind of what do we do with them? Those in between things. So that's an ongoing work still. So this is what it looks like now, and you'll see the background there. It's that what do you call that, plywood? And actually, because when I showed you the working situation, where we were filling the boxes, taking it from the mess room into the clean room. Once we were done with that, all of a sudden we had all these boxes that previously we didn't have, and they needed a space. We needed to literally build an archive room. So it was a strange thing to do maybe, but it was necessary. And in the end, now we're all used to it. But we annexed on both sides. We annexed parts of the exhibition space. So we sacrificed square meters of the exhibition space for the archive, which I felt. At the time I had a hard time accepting it, but it was necessary, and now it's fine. But you see how much it is already. So again, the archive just keeps growing, and at one point we're going to have to keep annexing exhibition space. So if you dramatize that a little, after a while we'll have no exhibition space left, and that'll be it. I don't think that's going to happen, but still. So that's more of that. And so each box has this kind of form, just to kind of show you what it looks like. And it's not rocket science. We are not professional archivists either. We have a wonderful archaeologist working with us, though, and she has of course, from archaeology background, better knowledge of these kind of systems than any of us did. So, and then what's in a box is basically what's listed on this. So there would just be a check per box of what the box contains. Just also because there has to be a log of them. All of a sudden you need to know what's in a box. And this is, for example, the content of one box. This is a content of the archive box of Cosima von Bonin's exhibition. And you see it's invitations, it's a catalog from a different show, it's a book that we did for the exhibition, and this huge kind of big-ass folder that contains budgets, that contains funding applications, that contains drafts for press releases, etc. So, and then CD-ROMs, of course, with all the images and things like that. And this is, again, because it's when you're looking at history, it's nice to start with the very first. This is the very first exhibition, again, by Guillaume Bell, and this is the content of that book. So you see the slides there, you see, these are really nice, I think. These are loan forms and condition reports. So they state the insurance value at the time, and they all have, and these were, what was wonderful, I think, also to see, because I don't make nice documents like that anymore. I don't think anybody does, but this is wonderful to think that there was someone who took pictures, printed the photographs, glued them on a paper, and added typed out the information and glued it in. It's a wonderful thing to have. And it shows also a lot about the conditions of exhibition making, which of course in the past 27 years or 28 years have changed dramatically, and every institution could look at that, how it's been following these technical developments, but also what it's not only about what changes, but it's also very nice to see what has remained the same, even though curators come and go, directors come and go, but certain things just still stay the same. Yeah, I think that was it for my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Sorry, I don't know if I may have missed if you already told us, but who uses the archive? It's you, the curators, or is it open to the researchers, or how can anyone have access to the archive?
So, for now, it's mainly internal use. I mean, artists who we invite. It's also become a thing where we proudly show off our archive to any visitor, because we want to make sure that people know it's there, of course. But the idea is also indeed to make it publicly available, not just throw open the door and say, hey, come in, but by appointment. Or I think for now, the main thing we should start doing is make sure that people know it's there. Of course, it's a very specialized archive in a way, but I think, I mean, the thing is, what would happen before also is people would email us and ask, hey, we're doing a Alan Sekula exhibition, and you did the big Alan Sekula exhibition back in the day. Could you send us the exhibition script for that? So we still get a lot of, I mean, and this I guess would be then peers in the field who would also consult us. And now I don't have to look through the building desperately hoping to find an Alan Sekula exhibition script, but now I know where it is. But ideally, yes, it would be used more even by a wider audience of I guess it would always be artist professionals or scholars, yeah. But that is definitely the idea. Yeah.
I want to know, what about the different branches of the archive? Because I understand there's like the exhibition branch of it all, like it's chronological, but you also have like the documents from the vid to the vid documenting itself, and you also have artists grabbing like material from the archive and doing new exhibitions. So what are like the main branches or threads of your archive, and what are the challenges locating materials?
Yeah, that's a good question. I should have added that maybe as well, is that one part of our archive we donated, which is a generous way of saying we handed over happily to the city archive, because of course it's also a city story. 27 years of an international art center in the city of Rotterdam. We are funded by the city of Rotterdam for an important part of our budget. So everything that was policy related, everything that was board minutes, everything that are these institutional papers, let's say, we had to prepare them. So that was a lot of work, because we had to do it following their actual official, standardized archival criteria. But then we handed over that part also because you saw space limitations. And for us, the interesting part is, of course, the artistic part of our archive. So, and in a way, those people interested in cultural policy making in the city of Rotterdam, they'll go to the Rotterdam City Archive. So in a sense, that division is very productive for all involved, I think. Secondly, there are of course always the unarchivables. Either because they don't fit anywhere, or literally because they don't fit in a box. Like posters and those scale models, etc., etc. So certain things just won't be put somewhere, and then you have to come up with spatial solutions, etc. In terms of artists using, they have all been very kind, and they've given it back. So there nothing's leaving the building in that sense, and it's always also more of a referential use of it. And I mean, thus far we haven't had anyone who actually wanted to take documents and use them and transform them. I wonder it's a good question hypothetically, like if we have an artist who wants to make a huge, collage using archival material, would we say, no, you can't use this is important archival material? Or let's see, when the day comes and artist wants to do that, we'll find an answer to that question. I think we should always remain flexible with it, and like having Casper insert his paintings in the archive already, I don't think we should make it too much of a sacred thing either. But of course some things you shouldn't touch. It's a case to case. It's very, and I think through all of these projects, the main thing that I very much enjoyed is archives are really interesting if you allow them to be subjective. The 20 plus book, it presents itself as an objective chronology of our program, but of course it's written by people, and it's written by people in a certain time from a certain position with certain interests, and you can read it and you see this exhibition gets 3 sentences and this exhibition gets half a page or a full page description. This is subjective, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's the main point as well. And I think if anything, artists have, and these projects that I've been talking about have helped us also, or at least have helped me to understand that we really have to avoid, because we are a small institution. I mean, we're a mid-scale institution. We're not an official museum. We don't really have that like a museum has that function and that task to manage the past, right? But we don't really have that, and we are doing it now, and it's uncharted territory. But I think the main thing is for us to keep doing that as we do all of our projects, which is artist-centric and really going for whatever vision someone wants to realize when working with this archive, and avoid precisely that cold and stern institutional attitude that won't allow for any, subjective interpretation. Yeah. Thank you all for being here.